Good morning and good evening, everyone across the world, for everyone who's watching this broadcast. Today we have another special guest. Dr. Leonard Horowitz is with us. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thank you very much, Joe.
So, Len, what inspired you to get into your line of research so many years ago?
Which line? I have a number of lines from pharmaceutical investigations and whistleblowing and government corruption to the way we're going to get out of this mess, in my opinion, is 528 love frequency music. So which area of expertise are you talking about?
That's a very good point. So let's start off with the 528 frequency. How about that?
Okay, sounds good. Well, that was a project that God presented to me back in, let's see, it was 19, let's see, my life started to change in 1990 with synchronicities happening, like divine appointments. But way into 1997, I began to move out of Massachusetts, and I was actually in search of the Achilles heel of the Illuminati. I'd been praying literally for the Achilles heel of the Illuminati. My mother had died of a vaccine injury, and I realized that the drug industrialists were out of control. And at that point in time, there was a doctor, Joseph Paleo, in northern Idaho, who was praying for me. He had heard me on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, actually, and this was way back. And by 1997, I was moving out of Massachusetts. I couldn't handle the mentality on the East Coast. It was outrageous politically, legislatively, and so I started to move. I didn't know where I was going to move, and through a series of divine synchronicities, I ended up knocking on this Dr. Joseph Paleo's front door for dinner in 1997, and then he laid on me the original musical scale. He had gotten that. This is actually the beginning of the book called Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. And I didn't even have time. I was so busy with so many things to take on the project that he wanted me to take on, which was to tell the world, herald globally, the original solfeggio musical scale.
Mm-hmm.
And that was given to him in a dream or a vision. It
Interesting.
was kind of both. Jesus came to him one night. He had struck out with the Roman Catholic Church. He was a very devout Catholic, and they wouldn't give him the information. So he was praying for the original musical scale, and ultimately his story goes that he had been visited by Jesus and a huge angel, and he relayed the story to me. The first 6 chapters of the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse is Joey's story. And in the book of Numbers, chapter 7, verses 12 through 82, is really where you begin to see the repeating pattern of verse numbers. In the verse numbers, the repeating pattern of frequencies of the original solfeggio musical scale, beginning with 3, 9, 6, 4, 1, 7, 5, 2, 8, and there's 528. That's the ut, re, mi, the miragistorum, the miracle note of the original solfeggio scale. And in the section of the Bible, it's about giving tribute to the Creator through various contributions to the church. And it was 528 was the gold. It's the most powerful, spiritually uplifting element. And that's 528, and it's a miracle note. And so that's how I got started in the 528. I went kicking and screaming, Joe. I really didn't have the time for the project, and I laid it on God. I said, listen, if you want me to do this, then you're going to have to provide some help, because I don't have the time. You know my schedule.
Right.
And I can tell you that I believe firmly I output the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse in about 6 months, and that was extraordinary. For me, it took me usually like 2 to 3 years to write a book that size.
Yeah.
And I had some divine help, I can tell you that.
Great. Amazing story. And, I think you're absolutely right when you have so much work or information that you want to get out there, and you ask yourself from a rational mind, how the hell am I going to do this? Then you kind of have to resort almost to divine intervention and say, if you want this done, I'm willing to do it, but help me. And things just happen. They do, they really do. So that's an incredible story. So
yeah, that's what happened. I think an angel wrote the book. Yeah, seriously, I'm very serious about that. Like, when I was doing research for it, there were so many extraordinary things that happened. I mean, like, Twilight Zone
Hmm.
stuff. I would be searching for, like, for example, one term or one phrase and where or some subject, and I would go on, let's say, do a search on the internet, and something
There it was.
completely
Right.
different would come up to have my attention. And man, that's really what the metaphysical world wanted me to cover.
Right. Amazing. So what about 528 is really the gold number, or it's the number of love. 528 hertz. Why, why exactly is there a rationale behind it, or something that you can place that into context for us to understand why that specific frequency is basically the number of love?
Yeah, I don't know. Have you had the opportunity to read the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love yet?
I did a little bit, yes, briefly.
Okay. Did you get into the physics and the mathematics of it?
No, no, I didn't get to that section.
Yeah, well, that's a contribution by some awesome guys. I have been blessed with being able to collaborate and hear from some of the world's leading physicists and mathematicians. And the first one that I actually had the opportunity to be shocked by, blown out by, after I had the original musical scale. Again, the notes are 396, 417, 528, 639, 741, and 852. Once we had those, about 6 months, 8 months later, on this property in Hawaii I was telling you about off camera, we had just spontaneously, two or three guys contacted me and said, "Hey, we'd like to use your property, if
Nice.
you wouldn't mind, for a physics and mathematics conference." And I said, "Sure." So, I happened to be in the audience when Marco Rodin presented his mathematical matrix of the universe, of creation.
Hmm.
And I'm just literally just sitting there watching him put these numbers up. And what he put up for his matrix was exactly the numbers I just said.
Wow.
And I go, whoa, can you believe that? So that was one of my introductions to the world of physics and mathematics. And then Nassim Haramein was there at this particular conference, and he presented again another matrix, but it was consistent with Rodin's matrix
Hmm.
of how the double toroidal, the like double donut shape, the figure eight, it's like a
Right.
figure eight, the way the universe is constructed according to the physicists. And then after these guys, I connected with Victor Showell,
Hmm.
who his name says it all, show well.
Uh-huh.
He shows the world very well that everything is sacred geometry, and he's basically worked out all of the mathematics and physics related to the physics that's underlying sacred geometry.
Hmm.
And so everything from carbon 6, that we're carbon 6 beings, to the shape of snowflakes, to the reason honeybees make their hexagonal shape beehive. And in fact, while they're doing that, the bees are buzzing in 528.
Wow.
We now have recorded
Wow.
that, and so, you start to see one piece of evidence after another. And a lot of people ask me, how can you prove that 528 is love? How can you prove that 528 is the center of the universe? Well, I don't say there's a smoking gun, but there's levels of proof. There's clear and convincing evidence. There's the propensity of evidence, or there's certain amounts of evidence that a reasonable person can then say, "Hey, listen, for me, that's adequate." And so in the book of 528, I go into a massive amount of circumstantial as well as scientific as well as mathematical evidence that leaves any reasonable person to understand that the reason grass is green is because of 528. That greenish yellow color of chlorophyll is 528. The heart chakra in Oriental medicine is this greenish yellow color.
Uh-huh.
Why is that? The reason is because that every one of our energy meridians in our bodies, and of course the entire body, when you look at yourself in a mirror, you're not seeing the larger atomic particles. You're not seeing protons. You're not seeing neutrons. They're huge compared to the electrons. When you look in a mirror, what you're looking at is an electron cloud. You're seeing electrons only. And that has stumped the physicists. They don't know what electrons are. Is it a wave? Is it a particle? Is it a wave particle?
Right.
We're not sure. You know, and what it amounts to is that those electrons, I call them the electrons of love, they are resonating in 528 primarily. Not only just at their heart, but when you understand the source. For example, the electrons of sunshine, all of the sunshine, which has been actually recorded. NASA scientists had recorded the sound of the sun. A researcher by the name of David Sarita sent me that recording. And you can take out your 528 tuning fork and listen to that tuning fork, and you can hear the NASA recording of the sun waffling around 528. You can also then say, well, what is the sun? It's hydrogen. It's 100% hydrogen. It's 98% hydrogen, 2% helium. Helium is double hydrogen. So it's 100% hydrogen. What's hydrogen? Well, there's your pH. In healthcare, the most advanced experts understand that your body chemistry makes your immunity. If you don't have an alkalinized body chemistry, you don't have immunity against cancers, arthritic conditions, all of the chronic diseases. Your body becomes a breeding ground for all of these bacteria, virus, fungus, yeast, cancer cells. And so pH, parts hydrogen, determines your body's capability to withstand disease. What is pH? Parts hydrogen, or power of hydrogen. What's powerful in hydrogen in the sunshine is that it's giving off the electrons of love. And where are those electrons of love carried? They're carried in the ha, the prana, the oxygen. And that's not only consistent with the Bible, as we know that in the blood, what carries the life, what carries the oxygen is hemoglobin. Well, what's the structure of hemoglobin? It's identical to the structure of chlorophyll, except plants have magnesium, which makes it greenish yellow color, and we have the iron. So other than that, pretty much the same structure is, and it's a sacred geometric structure that reflects this 528 sacred geometry, which gives you the shape of snowflakes. It gives you the carbon-6 organic chemistry ring that you and I made from. We're carbon-6 beings. The carbon is arranged in a hexagon. And so that's the Star of David, or Solomon's seal. What is that? In history, it's been known and defined as an amulet for the prevention of infectious diseases. That's what that Star of David is. And so ultimately, there's a massive amount of evidence. I could go on and on. The Book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love, goes on and on. You wouldn't have circles. There is a wonderful researcher by the name of John Stuart Reid, who's the world's leading expert in cymatics and looking at the effects in that world of science of sound on matter. And so John Stuart Reid takes the 528 frequency as an experiment. He plays it to water, and he photographs the water with a chymographic device, produces an image of a 36-pointed circle star, a star with 36 points. Well, now, and you know, John writes me saying, Len, this is unbelievable. I've never seen a chymoglyph like this. This is extraordinary. Well, what's extraordinary is you've got 36 pointed star from 528. Well, what is that? It reflects the 36 degrees and the 360 degree circle, the actual creation of the circle. And that's consistent with all of the other evidence, the measurements. For example, you have precisely 5,280 feet in a measured mile.
Right.
And so all of this information, you know, shows that there's something extraordinary in the heart of your heart, the heart of sunshine, the heart of a rainbow, which is greenish yellow, as above, so below. If it's true for the sun and the rainbow, it's got to be true for your heart and God's heart. And so there's a miracle. That's the miracle understanding and miracle note. And it's a clear channel. It's like when you tune your radio to a certain frequency, like if your heart is tuned to love frequency, then you're really, really in that clear channel broadcast of the Creator's most powerful, inspirational creation and energy. That's love.
Mm-hmm.
That's the universal healer. And so that's why I think what 528 represents and the frequency of music, it's not only when we play it, which is why we created 528records.com and why we put all of our money in 528radio.com so people could listen to their favorite music transposed into 528 and then get healed, get medicinal music. And that the concept is not only is it good for us, but for the entire planet. Because again, you've got to have a paradigm shattering event. You've got to have some sort of a full measure of spiritual blessing and anointing for people to wake up out of the fog that they're in of spiritual suppression. And that's what 528 represents to all of us who are studying it. You know, what does the green grass do? It reflects that greenish yellow color into the windows of your soul, your eyes. And what does 528 frequency do? It warms your heart. It expands your breath. That's one of the reasons one of the things that happens to me when I'm listening to 528 music compared to music that's not 528. What happens is I get a breath release. I actually get like a, you know, that kind of relaxation response that occurs from 528 music versus the dissonance. So at any rate, there's a lot of reasons why we believe that 528 is extraordinary, it's special, and it's like in the figure 8 where there's that one spot, that one sweet spot where the vectors cross, and just like in the double toroidal universe, it's kind of like the event horizon in physics. It's where the black hole, you know, you have a manifestation zone where something comes into creation from nothing. You know, you instantaneously miraculous manifestation from a divine frequency vibration. That's, in our opinion, the heart of creation. That's the heart of God's heart, heart of the rainbow, heart of your heart of my heart. That's love.
How does one get into 528, though?
Well, when you mean in your own experience?
In your own person, exactly. Like, let's say somebody listening to this program fully agrees with what you're saying, and then they say, okay, well, now I want to get into that frequency, the 528 frequency. How could one go about doing that?
Well, people are in love are doing it all the time. They don't know it, you know, and musicians worldwide are now catching on. The wonderful reality is that first of all, John Lennon, it's a mystery to us how John Lennon actually produced the greatest piece music called Imagine. His track Imagine was recorded in 528.
Wow.
And the bad guys have been on the internet since we announced that, and it wasn't me that discovered it. We had researchers internationally that feed us intelligence. And so we had somebody that pointed out to us that John Lennon actually recorded Imagine in 528, which meant he went out of his way to retune his white piano to 528. Man, it's hard to retune a piano. And, you know, so there was some intelligence. And, of course, literally, I mean, he did that before we published the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. So that's a great mystery. And you had recently Bono from U2. You might remember that Bono put out a new album that he presented for free, I believe it was, on the iPhones. And the feature track of Bono's and U2's album is called Iris. And Iris was his mother, and he loved his mother dearly. She saved his life. And so as a tribute to his mother, he recorded Iris in 528 based on my work. You have Amory, who's a Grammy Award nominee. You have many, many Grammy Award winners. We just had at our place in Hawaii a wonderful person, a magnificent vocalist, Maria Muldaur, stayed with us for 3 weeks in Hawaii. And she just gave the book of 528 to Bonnie Raitt, who requested a copy of it. And she says, that this is right up my alley. Nice. You have musicians. You had in Hawaii just a couple weeks ago, you had Jimmy Messina from Loggins and Messina performing. And we have a common friend who's an engineer in music, and he turned Jimmy Messina on to 528. And, Jimmy was skeptical at first, but he tuned his guitar and he started to sing. And he then calls his friend up and he goes, "Wow, I can't believe this." He says, "I can sing much easier in this frequency for some reason." Well, that reason is called phase locking in physics. Your inspiration as an artist or an artisan comes from your loving heart. Creation is about love, and it's about expression of an inspiration, a divine inspiration. And so when you're into that clear channel broadcast, it's like tuning a radio. If you can go to, let's say you're listening to your favorite music at 99.6 and somebody comes and turns the dial just 1/10 of 1 hertz to 99.7, suddenly you lose the clear channel broadcast. Right. It becomes static. And you listen to static longer and longer, and it's annoying, and then it's distressing, and then it's sickening.
Right.
So that's what's happened to music. People don't realize subliminally that they're listening to static, because when you tune from what Jimmy Messina did, he changed from A440 to A444, which gives you your C in 528. Suddenly, that's 40 times the static difference. You're going back into that clear channel flow, where now you've got the whole universe. You've got literally the heart of the universe that's behind your creative inspiration and your creative expression. And so, the musicians internationally are getting it, and they're just saying, "Wow, I had no idea." And then, of course, in the book of 528, we go into how did we get where we're at? How did we get to A440 standard concert tuning? And that's a horrible story. So I don't know if that answers your question, Joe, but
it does. It does. Well, let me ask you this. On the note of love in 528, I noticed on your website you were promoting a book which was entitled something to the extent that called Love and the Da Vinci Code, and it had the Vitruvian Man on the cover of it. What does the Vitruvian Man have to do with 528?
Everything. Oh, it's a wonderful revelation. Yeah, the book that I wrote, Love, the real Da Vinci Code. When you take the solfeggio scale,
okay, and
I'm going to explain to you how the Da Vinci's most famous drawing, and that is an icon for natural healing, the Vitruvian Man. It's actually a Vitruvian woman. There's a woman behind the man in that famous drawing, and I'll explain that in a second. But to get to that realization, the first thing I had to start with was what I've already told you about. You had the original musical scale, 396, 417, 528, 639, 741, and 852. And if you lay those down, as I did on a napkin, sitting at a restaurant one afternoon, and I began to look at the pattern, there's a pattern of numbers, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the hundreds column. And so you follow that. What's the next number? 9. And then in ancient mystery school Pythagorean mathematics, that you had all of the greatest geniuses. You had Da Vinci, Vitruvius, who was a mathematician. The Vitruvian Man is a mathematician. And that you had Plato, Aristotle, then, Pythagoras. You had the people who believed that math was the heart of creation, and that everything was a manifestation of musical mathematics. And so you took those numbers and you follow the pattern, and I sat there writing down on a napkin the other 3 frequencies. So that completed then what I call, and I've trademarked, the perfect circle of sound. That represents 9 core creative frequencies by which the entire universe is constructed. Again, the third note, the do, re, mi, the miracle note, is 528. So if you now take the Da Vinci drawing and you realize that Da Vinci was basically involved in the mathematical culture.
Right.
And I believe it was not a cult, it was the source of science. In fact, if you study science, the first book of science is called Physics. Physics by Aristotle, who was involved in the same knowledge and understanding. It's called philomath, or love math. That's what they called it. They called it philomath. And philos, love, that root word was the reason why that Aristotle named his book, the first science book, philos, or physics. Physics. He took philos, he made it physics, which was the science of love. And so you take the Da Vinci drawing. What he did was he created 4 arms, 4 legs, and a head. There's obviously 2 people. And where are those 2 people? Well, the man, in my opinion, based on my interpretation and the revelations, is that in the box. Mm-hmm. The guy is in the front, stuck in the box of earthly limitation. His hands don't go beyond the box. His legs don't go, his feet don't go beyond the box. But art historians say that the representation of the circle is the universal connection. Mm-hmm. And who has stepped out of the box of earthly limitation is the woman in back of the man. She alone has her fingers pierce the square, touches the circle. Her feet are standing on the universal circle of love. And that's really, in my opinion, the real Da Vinci Code. The 4 arms, 4 legs, and a head point to the 9 core creative frequencies. And at the level of the heart, again, if you start at 396 in the 12 o'clock position, your heart chakra, your heart zone is 528. So that's basically my revelation on the real Da Vinci Code.
That's amazing. You know, it's funny that you mentioned about, I didn't know that there was actually 2 figures and the woman was behind the man in the Vitruvian image. But it's interesting that you say that the woman is actually touching the borderlands of creation, because just today I was actually reading a book. It's basically about the Hebrew letters and what they actually represent, you know, in terms of their creational process, and it goes into like the Zohar. And I was just reading about the letter Bet, which represents female or creation, and Bet is basically the creative, the energy or the channel, the creative channel of our physical cosmos. And it's interesting that you mentioned that it's actually the woman behind the man who's responsible for that. So it's kind of like a ironic synchronicity we just had. It's interesting.
Well, let me expand on that, Joe, because I'll give you a delightful revelation. You know, if you start to study Hebrew and the original gematria and the meanings of the letters, all letters are based on mathematics. Mm-hmm. The original Torah was all sung, and it was all mathematics. Before it was the Hebrew letters even, it was all sung mathematically. And again, it goes back to the fact that the Creator's language is mathematics. Mm-hmm. The sacred languages, Sanskrit, ancient Aramaic, and Hebrew, all have the same kind of like capability of resonating with their frequencies of the sounds, physical matter into existence. So you take the Hebrew letters and the alphanumerics, the letter number derivations in Hebrew of where I'm broadcasting from, Hawaii, right? You know, the aloha, the spirit of love that is prophesied to emanate out from the big island of Hawaii in the end times. This is the prophecies that shall then herald peace on earth, 1,000 years of world peace, to fulfill even the Judeo-Christian prophecies. Well, aloha, take it from the Hebrew, and there is an absolute connection between Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, and ancient Hawaiian. Hawaii, literally translated in Hebrew, means Isle of Eve, and Hawaii backwards is Yahovah, the holiest of holy names of the Creator in Hebrew. But here's totally a great blessing, and it explains why when 2 Hawaiians, the Kanaka, the Aboriginals, get together, they don't shake hands, they don't kiss each other's face. What they do is they put their foreheads, like noses and foreheads, right together, and they look deeply into each other's eyes, and they take a breath. They literally breathe together. That's how they greet. They call folks people who are not of that ilk, not of the resonance of spirituality and love and harmony and aloha. They call them the ha'aulis, or breathless ones. people who don't have the breath, they don't have the spirit. And so it's kind of like in Native North Americans that white men speak with forked tongues. It's the same kind of, judgment and actually observation, really, of what's happening. But you take aloha, sourcing from Hebrew and the alphanumerics. The A is the aleph, the beginning, the alpha in the beginning, and then the L is the lamed, which is the heart of the Hebrew alphabet, 11 of 22 letters, and that is love in the gematria. So in the beginning there shall be love, and in the omega, in the end, there shall be love, carried by the ha, the breath of life, which is exactly what I said. Your greenish yellow chlorophyll pigment in the plant world is giving us the breath of life, the electrons resonating in 528 love, and the only other source of the electrons is water and the sunshine. You've got H plus OH minus equals H2O. There's your chemistry for healing, and miraculous healing is the electron, the H plus acid gives the electron of love over to the ha, the oxygen in the aloha or the prana, and now that's what sustains us. That's what heals us. That's what uplifts us spiritually as well as physically. So there's your true meaning of aloha.
Wow, that's amazing. That is actually the first time I've ever heard of that before, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's beautiful. It's just so beautiful to see the Hawaiian culture for what it really is, based on the advance in science and our knowledge in this field of the real Da Vinci Code. You get a whole complete change in your orientation to reality. That's why I tell everybody, and everybody admits it, once you get done reading the book of 528, your life changes. You don't ever just neglect the fact that you're walking around as a miracle in a miracle.
Right.
This whole reality is a miraculous manifestation of divine frequency vibrations. And the best definition of who you are a digital, bioholographic, precipitation, crystallization, miraculous manifestation of divine frequency vibration coming out of water. Let me give it to you again. You are a digital. That's mathematical. Bioholographic. Biology and holography. Everybody knows what a hologram is. You're a digital bioholographic precipitation, like a little nidus of rain of like H2O molecules suddenly in a cloud has its fellow H2O molecules joining, and suddenly now you have a little raindrop, a precipitation that falls out from a cloud as rain. You're a digital bioholographic precipitation. You're coming together that same way in this quantum field of physics that we now understand is musically, mathematically administered with 528 at its heart. So you're a digital bioholographic precipitation, crystallization. Every protein in your body, there's a whole field of science, is crystal, protein crystals. It's protein crystallography is the field of science. Everything about you is a crystal. Genetics is all crystallization. And the DNA is actually a sound and light receiver and transmitter. 96% of the function of DNA is to receive and transmit electrons,
right,
energy, light, sound, signals for intercellular communication.
Right.
And what's in the science world is called cellular upregulation, where you're actually created. You're moment to moment, instant to instant, you're being recreated by this sound energy. So where is chemistry in this? It's subordinate. Your physical reality is subordinate to your spiritual reality, to the medium in which, and the administration of the music within that medium, quantum field, in order to manifest everything about you. You give your parents, let's say, credit for your blue eyes or your brown hair. Well, that's only 4%. You can credit your parents, and this is, again, a deception and diversion in the world of genetic science and electrogenetics. It's missing out of our view of what DNA and genes are all about. when you realize that you're a spiritual being and that these are the processes that manifest you, suddenly now it shatters your whole concept, your paradigm in medicine and healing sciences, where you now begin to realize you are manifesting your brown hair, your blue eyes,
Yeah.
because of sound and light frequency signals that the DNA receives and then transmits, communicating to the other cells where certain cells and subatomic particles within cells and subcellular and extracellular space elements are all being administered likewise miraculously, as everything in the universe is likewise administered miraculously, holistically, in harmony.
That's absolutely phenomenal information. It is, I'm just thinking as you're talking here about putting things together from a different perspective, in the sense of exactly what you're saying, and trying to really put it all into context, because some of this stuff I've touched up on before, some of it's new to me, and it's just it's truly a very unique and powerful perspective what you're describing. So it's very interesting to say the least. But I want to ask this question before I forgot. You said you discovered 9 core frequencies, of which 528 was one of them, or the main one, really. What were the other frequencies, if you can divulge that?
Well, yes. And I wouldn't say 528 is the main one, because you're dealing with a circle, you're dealing with a matrix. Colleagues of mine also, I would recommend for anybody who's, challenging what I'm saying and wants to have more physics proof and mathematics proof. There's 2 guys that are doing extraordinary work. One, his name is Vernon Neppe, N-E-P-P-E, and he works with a fellow by the name of Ed Close, C-L-O-S-E. And these guys are absolute geniuses in the field of mathematics. Neppe has multiple degrees. I mean, I've never met anybody that's got more degrees than he has. He's a MD, that's a medical doctor. He's a PhD in psychiatry. He's got advanced degrees in physics. And he's actually, with Ed Close, published the God Matrix. He's called it the God Matrix. And we've been collaborating and corresponding with regard to 528, which apparently is the frequency of beryllium, which is one of the very important breastplate stones that the ancient Levitical priests used to use. It's a fascinating study. I believe that when the priests of old placed those stones on their breastplates and wore that, it gave them metaphysical and spiritual blessings and powers. And so that this is what some of your leading experts in medicine and physics are actually publishing today, is confirming what I'm telling you. And the 9 notes, therefore, work to maintain the balance. I think the most interesting discovery in regard to your question, the 9 core creative frequencies, I mentioned they are the perfect circle of sound. You can go to 528records.com, or actually 528revolution.com and 528records.com. There is the perfect circle of sound logo that we have, that is a body tuner. You can actually point your mouse to every single one of the colors and the frequencies, and you can hear the pure tone of that special frequency. Here is the challenge that's fascinating to me. You've got a lot of evil in the world. You've got a lot of great good. You've got a lot of evil in the world. And apparently in this planet we call Babylon, the evil has been in control for millennia. Well, we believe it's time for a shift of that and balancing it out. And that's what these revelations are really about. It's about waking people up to who they really are, and how it's administered, how it works, and how we should be working for optimal health, happiness, success, prosperity in all ways. And the frequency of 741, so you've got ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Those are the original 6. The ut, re, mi, miraclestorum in Latin, miracles in English, that's 528. Mi, fa, family torum, that's the family, the extended family. And then so, solve polute in Latin, or solve the problem in English. That's 741. And if you study these frequencies and the mathematics and the sacred geometrics, you realize that 741 is the only frequency that doesn't get along with love 528. But it's natural. It's part of the matrix. And it explains to me, as a scientist, as a researcher, it explains that dissonance is part of nature. So we can look at Babylon and we can say, okay, well, you know, it serves some purpose and it keeps us from being bored. If there was always just pure love and no challenges in our lives, you know, we'd probably all get bored. But the reality is that 741 is the dissonant frequency. You can think of it as when there's an emergency vehicle that is blaring its siren. It goes, ee-ah, ee-ah, ee-ah. Well, it's actually going, in many cases, 528, 741, 528, 741. They don't get along. They cause a jarring. They cause a dissonance. And in musicology, 741 is literally called, this is unbelievable, but it's literally called the devil's tone.
Wow. Wow.
And it's called the devil's tone. It's called the tritone. It's called the augmented fourth or diminished fifth. And that is what the classical musicians used in, let's say, the music of the night, that whole the whole play of the Phantom of the Opera was based on what I'm telling you. The Phantom was the devil, wow. And he falls in love with love, Christianity. He falls in love with the essence, and basically he's got her hypnotized, and with the music of the night, the darkness. Right. And in fact, the concept of the chandelier falling from the auditorium into the crowd in that play sources from Haydn's 96th Symphony. That's called the Miracle. And that Miracle Symphony, supposedly in history, the chandelier actually fell when Haydn 96, the miracle frequency was being played during that symphony, that the chandelier falls, but nobody was harmed. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like where the Phantom of the Opera, the whole concept comes from, but it's very true. And also in entertainment, I love the metaphor that is expressed in Yellow Submarine by the Beatles, that cartoon, wonderful production. What is it about? It's about the Blue Meanies come to Pepperland and steal their instruments, steal their music. So now the creative and loving people that are so happy in Pepperland become fragile black and white figures that are easily shattered by bombs. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the challenge is today. We've had our musical instruments, our frequencies suppressed. We have become shadows, black and white figures of the people, full living color, superhuman beings that we literally are by creation. And that the challenge for us is to recover the instruments, just like in the movie. Once you start playing 528 love music again, everything's going to come back into full living color, and we can be experiencing 1,000 years of peace on this planet. So that's what this 528 revolution is all about, and I believe why we were given these revelations at this time in history.
It's incredible information, Len. What about the number 216? Does that have any significance?
Well, the first thing I do is I take 2, 1, 6. That's a 9. That's completion. Okay. Again, in ancient mystery school Pythagorean math and in numerology, there's 1 through 9, and that's it. There was no 10s. 10 is the decimal system. It's man-made, and it's not consistent with what the physicists recognize that creates the matrix of universal creation. Mm-hmm. So it's a 9. What is a 9? Well, each of, as you'll read in Love, the Real Da Vinci Code book, each of the numbers have its unique meaning and resonance. And the 9 itself is an icon for spiraling up from earth into the wholeness of heaven. It's completion. Versus the 6, which is the yin-yang. 6-9 is the yin-yang symbol. The 6 is actually the manifestation miraculous. It's where it's something from nothing, spirals down into the wholeness of creation. That's the 6. And that's why you have XXX as adult entertainment. The most successful entertainment is triple X. That's XXX. In fact, in the alphanumerics of the English language, it's 1 through 9, 1 through 9, 1 through 8, A to Z. 1 to 26 letters is 1 through 9, 1 through 9, 1 through 8, 1 through 8. And then you've got FOX are all 6s. FOX, Fox Entertainment. You've got now the understanding when you're playing tic-tac-toe. Great example. You've got 9 fields. You've got X's and O's, 666, 666, 666 at the end of the game. 6 times 9 is 54. 5 plus 4 is 9. That's completion. Game over. So that's basically what I do to begin an analysis on a frequency or a number to get an essence of what it means. And then I will do some research. I might go on the internet. I might contact a couple guys. I might contact, for example, Vic Showell. I'll say, Vic, have you run into this number? Or Vernon Neppy. And these guys will give me a lot of feedback, or they'll say, gee whiz, I don't know.
Never heard of that one before, they say, right?
Well, that one I don't know. Again, I'm not really a numbers crunching guy. I'm more of like a guy that puts all the things together.
Well, what about this? The pyramids and Cheops. Let's just talk specifically, unless there is a reason you want to use another example of it, but like the pyramids and Cheops, were what they call the Great Pyramids in Egypt, the 3 pyramids, and Cheops, for example. What significance have you ever discovered with those structures and the number 528, or really any frequency that you've ever researched?
Well, that's a question I can answer based on Victor Showell's wonderful contributions. Vic has done an outstanding analysis, very thorough. I mean, years of research and number crunching to look at the Khufu angles, looking at all of the pyramids, looking at how they're laid out together and what that implies in terms of the sacred geometry and the connection to universal design. So that's Vic Showell, and you can get that information if you go on to 528revolution.com, click on the physics tab or the science and physics section and start to read the articles. And even more, if you really want to get into depth, Vic Showell has published a series of about 10 monographs that we've published up on that website. So you can really get into great depths. He has published the link between 528 and 432. You might be aware in music because of the trolls, because of we call them pharma trolls, the pharmaceutical industrialists. The drug companies don't want you to know about miraculous healing music because it would put them out of business. So they hired as protection racketeers. Of course, it's a multi-trillion-dollar business. They've got to have protection racketeers out there, and they are well represented in the social media. They're well represented in the mainstream media. They basically condemn people like myself. They call us frauds. They call us, weirdos, whatever. They try to discredit us, but you can't discredit hard, cold math. 1 and 1 is always 2, unless you're a liar and a cheater, which they are. So basically, Vic has published monographs that you can actually see the connection between 432, and he's done a beautiful chart, in fact, showing the sacred geometry of 432 versus 528. There was a whole movement to discredit 528 by these trolls, and they embraced 432. And they claimed, 432 is the perfect sound of the universe. It's so wonderful. It's so healing. And 528 is the devil's tone. You see, they flipped it. They literally flipped it.
Right.
But 432 is a fine frequency. Again, it's just this information that they output. There is a lot of good evidence that 432 is a powerful healing frequency, or could potentially be a good frequency. It needs more research. All of this, we need to have a research institute to advance further and to confirm what it is that we're saying further. So, but in essence, you can see from Victor Showell's work that 528 is absolutely represented in the construction of the pyramid designs. It, again, as I mentioned, it's at the heart of the perfect circle of sound in terms of the manifestation of the hexagon. 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 8 is 15. 1 plus 5 is 6, miracle 6, or MI6. You've just diagnosed where British Secret Service got its name. MI6 comes from miracle 6, comes from the original solfeggio 6th note of the original musical, the 3rd note, the miracle note, the MI6. 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 8 is 15, 1 plus 5 is 6. That's where it comes from. And so you can begin to look at that mathematics, and then you have additional confirmation what we're saying is certainly true.
It's incredible. So what about, I wanted to retract a little bit and go back to the biblical stuff. With the numbers that you've researched, like the 528 and the other constants and codes you've researched, have you discovered, and if so, where in the Bible these numbers and frequencies show up?
Yes, well, that was Dr. Palaio's contribution before he died. It was 1997 that I got to northern Idaho, that he had this dream. I then, in 1998, published, after 6 months of, as I mentioned, the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. And that goes into, I think it might be in the 3rd chapter or the 2nd chapter, where he then was directed. He had an angel with Jesus come to him after he prayed to Jesus for the revelation, and that he was directed to the book of Numbers, to chapter 7, verses 12 through 83. Therein, those verse numbers were added by the Levitical priests who were involved in alchemy. The priests of old, the people that played those shofar blasts and had the walls of Jericho come tumbling down miraculously, just like miraculously they were involved in the construction of the pyramids, because today you can't even consider, you don't have the physical equipment to be able to move those tons of huge sandstone and granite into the positions that they're in. They had to have used levitation. How do you do that? You've got to use the musical mathematics and metaphysics of creation in order to resonate and vibrate and move matter the way they did. So they were the ones that put the verse numbers in the Bible. Torah does not have any verse numbers. The King James was the first verse numbers, and excuse me, and therein, in chapter 7, if you take the verse numbers and then you do what we just did a couple minutes ago, you reduce the multiple digits into a single digit, then you will get the pattern 3, 9, 6. Every 6 verses in that section of the Bible, it lays out 396, 417, 528. You will read that section of the Bible, and you'll likely do what most people do, saying, I don't understand. This is like totally irrelevant to what what my life is like. And you would skip over that section of the Bible that has these repeating verse numbers that are virtually inane, meaningless. And then what you just skipped over, in my opinion, is probably the most significant and important part of the Bible, because it lays out what has been prophesied in Isaiah 22:22 and excuse me, and Revelation 3:6 through 8. In those sections of the Bible, it talks about in the end times that there is a 6th angel from the city of Philadelphia that represents the city of brotherly love, that comes to herald a key to the house of David, that opens doors that no man can open, and closes doors that no man can close. A key is a musical note. A vortex of energy in your chakra system is a door that men cannot open or close. It's a spiritual thing. God can open and close it. So the key is, in my opinion, of love, 528. That's the key to the house of David. Again, Davidian seal, the seal that King David, who played, by the way, a miraculous healing harp. You remember that?
Right.
Okay. So the house of David, the healing harp, was tuned to the frequencies of 528 love, and the image that David met Goliath with, and the Israelites went to battle with, that sacred geometry of the hexagon shape Star of David. That is a very powerful image, very powerful protector, despite the fact that it's been now disparaged internationally by the anti-Semites, by anti-Zionists. Sherry Kane and I, investigative journalist Sherry Kane, whose work is fantastic. I'm privileged to work with her. She has done an outstanding job working with me recently on the Paris attacks video. We have it up on revolutiontelevision.com. You can watch it. You can see how the whole Israel, Star of David, Zionist issue is completely distorted by mainstream media and the trolls who want people to be divided, to be angry with one another instead of in peace and harmony and in love. So this is part of what it is that we're advancing, coming from the revelation of the numbers in the Bible.
So that's so the star of, the key to David, the house of David, like you mentioned, is 528. That's the key.
That's my conclusion.
Okay.
It makes complete, total sense. Again, for people like myself, I'm a Harvard degreed. I have a doctorate from Tufts University. I was on the faculty at Tufts teaching microbiology and histology. I was doing that with both dental and medical students. I'm a Harvard degreed public health expert in emerging diseases. I have to think very scientifically. I want to have facts. I don't want to have hogwash.
Right.
And then when you're looking at levels of proof, statistically significant evidence of association, and what would present a jury with substantial evidence that would cause a conviction. Well, in this particular case, there's a massive amount of evidence of what I'm saying is true.
Right.
And so I think that that's compelling.
Amazing. So let me ask you, I know you have to go soon, so how many more questions can I pose to you? One or two more?
Sure, let's do them.
Okay. I think, even though this may seem like a different subject, I think it's probably exactly the same, it's just repackaged. The music of the spheres. Plato talked about a music of the spheres, which had to do with astrology, but also basically the creational method. What can you say about that, the music of the spheres, and the numbers that you've discovered or researched?
Well, the expert in that field is a colleague of mine. We've broken bread together at dinner. His name is Dr. Carl Baugh. He's from the Creationistic Institute. He began the Creationistic Institute in Texas. And he's an expert in the music of the spheres. He's a Christian prophet and scientist. And he's an outstanding contributor to this understanding that in the beginning, you could actually, like when, our ancient people could actually hear, not just see. For example, in Hawaii, we still have enough clear sky to be able to see Venus going through a variety of colors, twinkling, constantly changing beautiful colors. You can just, it's a magnificent thing to just watch. Well, colors, the physical color itself in the electromagnetic color spectrum, sources from sound. Go back into the Genesis. Go back and you realize in Genesis 1:1, 1:2, the very beginning of the Bible, you had the Creator and the water. And the water. You had where the Spirit of the Creator, the Holy Spirit, hovered over the face of the water and divided the water from the water, into which the words, let there be light, words, sound, frequency, let there be light was spoken, and out popped the sun. So that is consistent with the science. Creation begins with sound. Sound is math, because sound is frequency. It's electromagnetic frequencies. So the Creator's language to create the spheres and everything that radiate in different colors, that's all sound manifesting in physical reality. So that's essentially the music of the spheres. You could not only see in the old days the colors of the planets, you could actually hear them resonating certain frequencies of sound, music, harmony that Dr. Baal talks about.
Amazing. I'm gonna have to contact him sometime soon, because I know recently, and I'm sure you've heard about this. It's not a huge secret, but NASA's discovered that every single planet actually has its own frequency that it emanates, which you can hear. So I'm sure that somehow fits into that big picture. But I guess how exactly? At least I don't know. Maybe people out there do know, but I don't know.
Yeah. Again, when you look at the sphere sizes and shapes, it's the same thing. You can take a bowl, a tuning bowl, and healing bowls. Each one has its size, each one has its pitch, frequency associated with the size. The same thing with the spheres. When you speak to Dr. Baal, give him my love.
Will do, absolutely.